Now, I'm aware of the fact that I'm kind of throwing myself to the lions by making this video, but I'm making it because I think it's worth discussing this subject a bit further. I feel that there's still quite a bit more to say, and I'm also making this video because some people have contacted me and requested that I speak my mind in relation to Dr. Morse's recent response to my question about the internal use of Comfrey root. Now, I'm not directing this video at Dr. Morse. I don't really see the point. I've got a lot of respect for him, and I don't want to get into some sort of debate with him over this. I'm sure he's got much better things to do, so have I. I don't really want to get into a debate about this with anybody, actually. I'm not trying to prove that I'm right. I'm not trying to prove that anyone else is wrong. I just feel that this subject was not represented in its entirety, so I just want to try and bring more information to the surface, that's all. So, to be honest, most of the messages that I received relating to this whole subject have been pretty negative, in the sense that people have been just kind of abusive, really, you know, just telling me that I'm stupid, that I've got no idea what I'm talking about, that I've believed the first little bit of propaganda that I came across on the internet about Comfrey, and, you know, how dare I question Dr. Morse, who the hell do I think I am to question Dr. Morse, and, you know, people as well just sending me kind of silly messages, just laughing at me because Dr. Morse apparently put me in my place or made me look like an idiot. So thank you to all of you people that let me know all of that, but I personally don't feel that's really what happened at all. So I would also just like to recommend not wasting your time or my time sending me similar kinds of abusive messages relating to this video, because, you know, this video is not an attack or an argument or anything of the sort. I'm not making this video for those reasons. It's not my agenda at all. I'm making it purely for those people that want to do a bit more research on this subject, and those people who are interested in really considering all the options related to this subject. So before I actually get deep into the subject at hand, I'd just like to set things straight a little bit. Just because people may have differing opinions on a controversial topic, it does not automatically mean that they're engaged in some kind of battle, or like it's me versus him, or that everyone watching has to take sides, or, you know, this is just like totally childish school playground nonsense. You know, I'm fully aware of the extent of Dr. Morse's experience. You know, I've got loads of respect for the fact that he has healed and continues to help so many people. I'm not against him. I'm not trying to upset him. I'm not trying to upset anybody. I just felt that there was an important point to raise here, and I find it pretty sad, actually, that we can't even allow each other, you know, to ask genuine questions without trying to ridicule the asker, you know, as if they were some sort of moron that had no clue what they were talking about. You know, that kind of behavior, to me, it kind of stinks of religious fundamentalism just a little bit. So anyway, for those people that are watching this video that have got absolutely no idea what I'm talking about and don't have the background story, basically what happened was Dr. Morse promotes the internal use of Comfrey root. Now, Comfrey contains herbal constituents known as pyrrolizidine alkaloids that are especially concentrated in the roots, and which apparently have the potential to be highly toxic to the liver. Now, I asked him about this, and I think that my question may have irritated him a bit, you can view the video where he responds to my question in the link below in the description box. The answer went over 2 videos, but the first video where he begins to answer, there's a link to that video in the description box. And it starts, I don't know, it's quite a way into the video. It's like over halfway through the video when he starts to answer that question. Now, again, this video that I'm making is not my way to stir things up or create, you know, a division or any kind of fuss. I'm not trying to speak negatively about Dr. Morse. I just feel that there is a large part of this story not being told, and so this video is just really my attempt at filling in a few of the blanks, that's all. Now, I personally think it's a bit misleading to label Comfrey root, at least, as completely safe with no contraindications just because it's a whole herb product and because it's been used by indigenous people for a very long time. There are very clear risks, especially relating to the root. Now, I'm not suggesting that it's completely off limits, but there are many factors to consider from both plant and human perspectives. And also from what I've seen, Comfrey root appears to have been used primarily as a medicinal herb by our ancestors, you know, which obviously had very potent actions and was not really consumed constantly over the long term. It was only really considered as appropriate medicine when it was deemed absolutely necessary. So, talking about ingesting the root as much as you like with a guarantee of complete safety is, I think, a bit misleading, and I will explain why in a minute. But I feel that, you know, my question to Dr. Morse was a bit misconstrued. I think I definitely could have asked it better and in a clearer way. But, you know, personally, I have been using Comfrey internally on a regular basis for years now, but I've only been using the leaf, not the root. So, you know, I wouldn't advise anyone to not consume the root either, because that is a completely personal choice that we should make as individuals once we've gathered all of the relevant information. Hence, I'm making this video. Now, I know that the root has many healing properties as a demulcent. I know it's very soothing on the digestive tract. I know that it has very potent healing actions on things like stomach ulcers. But I choose not to use it internally because I've done quite a bit of research on it. And I've also consulted with some really excellent herbalists who actually echo the same sentiment of caution when ingesting the root. So, you know, it isn't my position to tell anyone what to do or what not to do. I just think it's important that we really educate ourselves properly on matters like this and not just believe what we read or what one person tells us, but really cross-reference all of our information from a wide variety of sources. And based on that, we can form our own opinions. Now, personally, my opinion is 100% subject to change at any time. As soon as new and enlightening information surfaces and paints a completely new picture, you know. Now, as Dr. Morse's response to my question didn't really do that, for me at least, I think it's worth sharing some of what I've learned about Comfrey root, and I'll also provide quite a few references to have a look at in the description box in an attempt to, you know, just broaden the scope of this discussion a bit and, you know, help so that we can help to develop our own ideas about this. Now, I think that this is important not just solely for the purpose of safety, but also because everybody that contacted me that was in opposition to me was either calling me names or, you know, just generally being really negative, or they were forwarding me links to what Dr. Morse has said, links to what Dr. Morse has written on this subject, but nobody ever forwarded me links to what anyone else has said about this, and nobody told me what actually they themselves think about this, or any of the other research that they've done on it. Now, I already know what Dr. Morse has to say about this. I've asked him directly. I know what he thinks. He's told me all about it. I don't need anyone else parroting what Dr. Morse has got to say about this, you know. He's already told me. So, with all of that said, we can get down to the actual matter at hand. Now, what is the problem with comfrey root? Well, the pyrrolizidine alkaloids in comfrey, they're not exactly toxic by themselves, but they become extremely toxic once they enter the liver, and they can cause major obstructions in the veins of the liver, and it can lead to something called hepatic veno-occlusive disease, which it can descend into complete liver failure, you know, like cirrhosis and ultimately, you know, even death. Now, Dr. Morse said that only the isolated alkaloids from comfrey can cause liver disturbances, but when it's in the whole plant form, there are all of the necessary buffers and cofactors present to render the alkaloids completely harmless and safe to consume. Now, I'm well aware of the obvious difference between isolated plant extracts on the one hand and whole herbs, you know, on the other hand, but sometimes whole herbs can still pose a very real risk to our health if ingested. You know, look at bloodroot or poison hemlock, you know, which incidentally looks exactly identical to angelica. So he also said that no one ever got hurt from comfrey. But that isn't strictly true, because there have been recorded cases of liver disease that are intimately related to the internal use of comfrey root. There have been a number of deaths, including infants, where really all other possible causes of toxicity have been completely eliminated, leaving only comfrey root as the possible cause. And this is from the herb. This is not from an alkaloidal extract of the herb. Now, you know, there's links in the description box to articles from a herbalist called Paul Bergner, really amazing herbalist, very reputable source of information for validating these claims. Now, one of these articles also has an analysis on some of the different toxic doses of pyrrolizidine alkaloids in people from around the world, followed by a second analysis that examines the amounts of these alkaloids that are present in some common comfrey products that are on the market. And what it shows is that there is at least a strong potential for these products to actually be toxic to the liver if they were consumed over the long term or by those with a weakened constitution. Now, hepatic veno-occlusive disease is extremely hard to diagnose. It can only actually be confirmed by a liver biopsy. So this can really create the potential for a lot of misdiagnoses on a really large scale. And although there haven't been many people who have officially died from ingesting comfrey root, there may be considerably more that were actually the result of a misdiagnosis. Now, some cases have been confirmed through autopsy as well, and also people suffering from conditions like hepatitis and cirrhosis and all of these kind of liver-related conditions, they're very often not questioned about any herbal intake. So, you know, this can make things even more confusing. Now, comfrey root is the common use of it. It's commonly prescribed for chronic digestive problems primarily, but the issue is that you know, these kind of treatments can often take quite a long time to run their course, which can actually increase or elevate the potential risk of toxic accumulation in the liver. Now, you know, also factoring into that is that individual people are going to vary in their susceptibility to this, or their ability to deal with this. And the plants themselves can also vary a lot in their concentration of these pyrrolizidine alkaloids, depending on the climate, or they can also vary a lot from plant to plant in the same climate. And even levels of alkaloids can vary a lot within one individual plant, just from season to season. So, it can be almost impossible to tell how much is in a single plant, without closely analyzing each plant individually, which, that is just never going to happen. So individual plants have been known to see an increase in pyrrolizidine alkaloids by up to 16 times within a single year. So, it's not as simple as just saying that, these alkaloids are rendered harmless in their whole herb state. Now, another factor to consider is that you've got different varieties of Comfrey. Now, Henry Doubleday did a lot of really pioneering work and research with Comfrey here in the UK in order to make its amazing health benefits more available to people by hybridizing it to basically reduce the concentration of these alkaloids and make it safer for long-term use and more available to more people. But notoriously there is mislabeling of species, apparently, which is very common, and many products on the international market have been independently tested, and they have been shown to have a very high concentration. Now, in Canada, 9 out of 13 different Comfrey products were analysed, and they did show very high concentrations of something called echimidine, which I think that's how you pronounce it. And that's actually thought to be Comfrey's most toxic alkaloid, which is apparently supposed to have been bred out of the commercially available varieties. Now, the leaves had almost none of this in them, whereas the roots actually had really high amounts of this, and officially, they're not supposed to have that in them. There's another link in the description box where you can read about that. Now, it's not my aim here. I'm not trying to demonize Comfrey in this video at all. I mean, as I said, I do consume the leaf regularly, and I have done for many years. I don't think it is at all appropriate to completely rule out the use of the root internally either. But if it really must be used, then I think it's important to consider that this part of the plant, the root, as a medicinal part of the plant, and not a tonic herb that can just be consumed as much as you like. I mean, perhaps, a short course of the root in people with a really strong constitution could maybe be considered harmless, but, indiscriminate, constant exposure to anyone that's willing to take it, it may be something to, exercise a bit of caution with, I think, and above all else, I think that, nobody's force-feeding this to us. So it really is our responsibility to do our own research and form our own ideas about it. And that's the whole point of this video. I'm not for or against anything, but I just think that looking at the big picture, it's essential, and trying not to just focus in and dial in on one part of the picture, on just one area of it. Now, one of the really common points that is raised by people is that, there's so many legal pharmaceutical drugs that are making people sick and that are killing them in large numbers on a daily basis. Why not have an issue with that instead of the comparatively small amount of cases involving a natural plant like Comfrey? And, that in some respects is a fair point, but in another way it's totally irrelevant because, I'm not the FDA and we're not talking about pharmaceutical drugs. Of course, that's a huge problem in itself, but just because something is potentially less dangerous than something else, it doesn't mean that we should just classify it as perfectly safe without any risk and just focus on the bigger problem. You know, if there is any possible risk at all, then surely we owe it to ourselves to assess that risk, you know, and act from a totally balanced viewpoint, and, you know, not any of this extreme one-sided stuff. Now, you know, here's what some really awesome herbalists and healers have actually said regarding comfrey root. Now, Stephen Harrod Buhner, who in my mind is one of the greatest herbalists alive. Hang on a sec. I just need to get his book. He, in my mind, is one of the greatest herbalists on this planet at the moment. Now, in this book, Sacred Plant Medicine, he said, hang on, I should have bookmarked this properly. As a word of caution, some medical researchers and herbalists feel that the high concentration of pyrrolizidine alkaloids in comfrey root present a danger of liver damage. Because of this, I generally use comfrey only if the damage from ulceration is severe, and I limit its use to 30 days only. Now, you know, he's not saying not to use it, but he's advising extreme caution and, you know, using it only in the most extreme cases, and it's for a very short period of time. Now, what he's talking about in this book, Sacred Plant Medicine, really amazing book, highly recommend it. What he's talking about here is much more in keeping with the traditional indigenous use of comfrey root, to my knowledge anyway. Now, another really excellent herbalist, a Western herbalist in the US, called Sean Donahue, he said that he would never recommend comfrey of any part of the plant be used internally at all, the root or the leaf, because he said that there's a kind of variable risk that's really just not worth the gamble. You know, and there are many other herbs out there that can achieve the same results without the risk factor. Now, even Susan Weed, who is probably the biggest comfrey infusion advocate on the whole planet, even she advises caution and responsibility to make educated, informed decisions before you commit to use the root internally. Now, you know, on that note, I'd just like to mention that Dr. Morse did say in his response to me that all of this information regarding the dangers of comfrey is coming from, I think he said, herbal wannabe idiots that think that they know what they're talking about, but they haven't got any clue what they're talking about, or they don't know crap, I think he said, and that all of this information originates from FDA propaganda. Now, you know, I'm absolutely aware that the FDA and other regulatory agencies do have a really big part to play in spreading, you know, all kinds of inaccurate misinformation and propaganda on many things, including this topic. But that doesn't mean that, you know, we should just ignore the medicinal aspect of the root, which should, as Stephen Harrod Buhner said, require the use to be carried out over short periods with regular intervals. Now, I personally would not put Stephen Harrod Buhner, Paul Bergner, Sean Donahue, Susan Weed, I wouldn't put any of those people in the category of, you know, herbal wannabes that are stupid and don't know what they're talking about. Now, I know that Dr. Morse didn't consciously direct that remark at any of those people, but all of those people do advise either to avoid ingesting the root full stop, or they advise using it only in extreme cases and very cautiously as a medicinal herb over very short periods of time. You know, so that's what they're saying. Now, you know, obviously you need to do your own extensive research on this subject. If you want to consume the root internally, I think it's important to look at, like I said, the big picture. I definitely recommend not taking animal studies too seriously, if at all seriously, because they're really highly questionable in how relevant they are to humans. I'd also not take studies done with isolated constituents too literally either, because they're often not representative of the whole plant. And most importantly, I would gather information from many sources, and cross-reference it as much as you can and really build a stronger, bigger picture that ultimately is more flexible and more able to adapt. So, please read through some of the links that I've posted down in the description box. Do your own research on top of that. I mean, like I said, I'm 100% open to being wrong about this or about anything. I don't really care about being right, and I'm not trying to make anyone else look bad. I just want to encourage people to empower themselves, really, with with gathering information that can help them to avoid any unfortunate and really unnecessary problems. Now, I'd like to reiterate that I'm really not aiming this at Dr. Morse. And, he said that he's never had anything but really excellent results from using Comfrey root on all of his patients. So, and I believe him. So ultimately it's up to us as individuals to decide what we think about this. Personally, I don't feel the need to use the root internally. And, I do incorporate the risk potential into that decision. Now, I don't do it out of fear. I'm not afraid of Comfrey. I think it's a really amazing plant. It has so many uses, for people, for animals, as well as, it's got a really important role in the ecosystem. I just think that as herbalists or just consumers of herbal products, it's really important that we respect the plants as not only substances to be taken in, but also as intelligent beings, really, that have so much to offer on so many different levels and so many different dimensions. Now, it's really important to develop relationships with plants and, over time try to learn the unique nuances and boundaries that each plant has. Obviously, there are so many plants that are completely safe to consume no matter what, and obviously those are the tonic herbs. But there are times when plants are not safe to consume. Just because it's a whole plant and it was made in nature does not mean that it's okay to just, take as much of it as you like, or sometimes take any of it. So, there is an element of risk to consider sometimes, and, we really need to take that into account. So to conclude, someone left a comment on Dr. Morse's video saying that, they wanted to know what I thought about this, because either Dr. Morse is lying or I got my information from a bunch of idiots. And, I'd just like to say that this is exactly the kind of outlook that I think is really creating a lot of limitations for our development, as individuals and as a community as well. And it really pits us against each other and creates all kinds of divisions, and it's complete nonsense, really. I don't think either of those options are at all true. I don't believe for a minute that Dr. Morse is lying at all, nor do I think that any of my teachers are idiots, and I don't think any of the sources of my information are a load of crap. So I think there's many views to consider and many angles to look at this from, and what works for one of us is, very unlikely to work for everyone the same way. What works for some person really doesn't work at all for another person. So if I could leave any kind of message behind, it would really be to do your own research, keep an open mind and be open to change your opinion as and when, you know, new, genuine information arises, because it's our tendency to rigidly attach ourselves to philosophical ideologies that I think it can create a lot of stagnation, and it can really inhibit our growth. So that's it. That's what I've got to say on this. I hope that was informative, and take care, and I'll see you soon.